The simple point is that the human mind, and if you think about what we are, what we prize and covet most about ourselves as a species, we're not as fast or strong or don't have olfactory and other kinds of sensory systems as good as a lot of other species, but what we covet that distinguishes us is this thing we call mind. And that mind and the sensory systems that go along with it evolved in a biocentric, not an engineered or constructed world. And why? It's all about fitness and in survival. That our intelligence evolved to support a hunting and gathering lifestyle. We developed adaptive responses to natural stimuli in all sorts of ways that conferred fitness, reproductive success through our evolutionary past. We developed these modular capacities in our brain that process information, responds to coping with the natural world in all sorts of obvious and subtle ways, and that a whole repertoire of intellectual and emotional responses were produced as a consequence that became ingrained, part of who we are, our biological system. And the argument is that, rather than there being vestigial, okay, they were nice to have when we were, evading predators or trying to take down ungulates, but, they're nice but no longer necessary. The argument here is that they are not only biologically encoded, but they continue to be adaptive in all sorts of ways. Now, the data is thin, but the data is there, that even in a modern urban world, whether you're an investment banker or you live off the land, that there are all sorts of qualities that confer fitness, that make us successful, that make us, whatever you want to call it, everything from adaptive and functional to satisfied, comfortable, happy, whether it be health and healing, stress reduction, the ability to restore our emotional state, our attentional capacity, our critical thinking skills, our mastery skills, our problem-solving skills, our ability to explore and be creative, to be imaginative, to innovate. These are all qualities. It doesn't matter whether you're living in an urban context or you're living on the land. All of these are adaptive and functional. That all of these are facilitated by our experiential connection to the natural world, particularly during the most important learning period. Even though we're this unique creature capable of lifelong learning, it stands to reason it is the case that the most important learning period is childhood. And that experiential connection and all these adaptive skills and problem solving and critical thinking and creativity capacities and so forth are developed in very subtle contextual ways through a whole variety of interactions and relationships children have historically had with the out of doors. And I don't mean the great out of doors, I mean the everyday out of doors. If biophilia is a inherent tendency, and we believe in evolution, we should find that it's in non-human primates, at least our closest relatives. And while again the data is limited, there is data by some of our best primatologists to show that there are adaptive benefits of experiential contact with nature which go beyond the simple and obvious food gathering or protection, exploration, social learning, attachment and belonging, a sense of identity, the capacity for investigation and discovery, emotional mediation in our relationships, primates in the relationship to one another, and using the nature as a mediating tool use, pleasure, wonder. All these are characteristics we can identify with as much in ourselves as we can in non-human primates, and they appear to be facilitated and enhanced by a contextual relationship. If you put a primate, a non-human primate, in a cage, they often lack these qualities. In addition to that experiential importance of our relationship to nature, it's not just having contact with the natural world, it's having contact in a context that's meaningful. Again, we've changed an awful lot, but still humans are a territorial creature. We evolved, and as a territorial creature, where place was very important to us in terms of access to resources and controlling over those resources, seeking and obtaining refuge and safety, and ability to have prospect and wayfinding through environments, to organize the complexity that is the natural world, to explore and discover resources and evade predators, and imposing meaning and legibility on natural systems. All of these were facilitated by knowing where we were, having familiarity and access and connection to the places where we were that rewarded territoriality. So it's not just experience, it's experience in a context. Even though we're obviously a very cosmopolitan creature today. Rene Dubos put it this way, that we had this desire on a sensory, emotional, spiritual grounds to have an intimate identification with the places we live, no matter how far and how cosmopolitan we are. We like to have a place that we call home. And that sense of place, that sense of connection to place, is a fusion of culture and nature, not one or the other. So biophilia is all about fitness. And biophilia is all about that the experience of nature in a place-based context is not a luxury or an amenity, something that we can, it's nice but not necessary. It's in fact a key to living a life of satisfaction and meaning. That is a crucible on which our fitness has always been, continues to be, and hopefully will always be forged. And if not, again, I would argue we turn our backs on that at our peril. Now, what's the scientific evidence to support this notion? It's, bits and pieces. I think it's kind of ironic. We're probably the first generation in the history of our species that had to have it proved to them that nature was important, but nonetheless, we like proof. There's bits and pieces, and in the biomedical field, we find that contact with nature actually fosters recovery from illness and surgery, that workers in office settings with natural lighting and ventilation, and that's the lowest hanging fruit, obviously, of contact with nature, actually perform better, have lower stress, and greater motivation, that even higher order cognitive functioning, such as memory and concentration, are facilitated by experiential contact. And I mean nature in a broadest sense of the word. I'm going to come back to this later, but I mean nature not only directly, but also indirectly and contextually, and even in a room like this, you can have, in the patterns of a rug, not much, but you can have some reminders. And that the functioning of the human brain is deeply genetically tied to sensory stimuli emanating from the natural environment, even if it's simulated. So in health studies, this was a famous study that was done where recovery from gallbladder surgery was a fairly rigorous study, matched samples. One looked at a brick wall, the other one vegetation. A brick wall is actually a pretty good simulation of nature because it has fractal geometry and some natural material. Most people in hospital rooms look at it nothing. They look at it in a white wall. And that they actually found that patients with nature window view had shorter post-surgical hospital stays, fewer minor post-surgical complications, far fewer negative comments and nurses' notes, which may sound trivial, but that actually impedes performance on the part of nurses. The wall view patients require far more potent painkillers. There's a lot of other studies.